Okay, we're back on the VR4 build. We've got the block back. Had them soaked to get it nice and clean. They also decked the block and the heads. Had them put freeze plugs in the block, new freeze plugs. And on the heads I had them do a valve job and put new valve seals in. And I've been waiting forever for a gasket set. So in the meantime, I decided to order up some gauges from Pro Sport. And hopefully they're good gauges. They have some good reviews. So I got these three up in my pillar here. I got a top one's exhaust temp, second one down is boost, third one down is my oil pressure. Over here I've got the air fuel gauge on the left, water temp in the center, and oil temp on the right. I also put in a scan master while I was waiting, and a turbo timer, which is right here. It's supposed to be sticking right in this area, but I just arm rolled the dash while I had it out, so nothing will stick to it. I also fixed the vents, which are always broke on these cars. Can't really see it through the reflection, but those were cracked and broke. I actually re-glued the dash down. Seemed to be what was breaking them, is the dash padding was actually peeling up, putting extra pressure on those and snapping them. So I'm still waiting on a full gasket set for this car, so that's what's taking so much time. But I've also got all my parts powder coated black here, and I also did my accent color is going to be white, which hopefully will look better than green. So here's all my white. Got all those powder coated, which if you guys don't have one of those, get one. They work awesome. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to hone this block out. I don't know if I need to do a video on that or not, but we'll hone it, get the pistons in, crank in obviously first, check with plastic gauge, and yeah, we'll be moving up, and hopefully we get a gasket set so we can put that baby back together. Alrighty guys, we finally got our gasket kit. That's how long it took. That's how dusty my car got. So, I know I've already shown you, but since the last little part of the video, while I was waiting, I finished wiring the gauges in. Completely finished in here, everything's done. Honed out the block there. Here's my hone. I didn't do a video on it. If you guys want to know how to hone, this is the particular hone I used. It worked out great. I can never get this damn thing to focus. Try it right there. Well, whatever. If you guys need the number, just put her in the notes there. Just a ball hone, flex hone. Works great. So, finally got the gasket kit, and here it is. So we're going to move on, get our pistons put back together, get everything cleaned up, ready to rock, and once we get that going, we'll get this baby back together. Oh, and also going back into this, get yourself one of these if you don't have one. I've got a few of them. I know my car is not a stealth, but I like the color blue. Alright, I have an actual Mitsubishi one, but it's yellow. And obviously, I like blue. I mean, VR4 is blue. Can't argue with the Roadrunner. I mean, B5 blue cannot be beat. I don't care who you are. So anyhow, let's get this thing put back together and make some progress. Been waiting for way too long for this. $500 right there. Strange. But yeah, that's the luxury of owning our cars. So here we go, boys. Okay, everybody, we're getting ready to get our crank put in this thing. Last minute notes. You get your bearings back out the plastic gauge. Make sure these are nice and clean. Clean up everything. Brake clean in these holes. Blast them out. Make sure everything is just spotless. Do that also with the crank. Clean it, get every little valley just spotless. So we've got that done. what we're going to do in the video here is I'm going to turn in my studs, then I'm going to lay the crank in, get the main girdle on there, and we're going to torque down the crank. So, here we go. Alright guys, we've got our main girdle off. We're looking at the plastic gauge here that we place on each one of our main bearings. Now we take the plastic gauge paper and we'll line it up to check the width of the plastic gauge. And if my camera would focus, it would show you're at 0.015, which is right in the middle, which is perfect. So, not too tight, not too loose. And each one of our mains, as you can see here, and the last one there, are at that 0.015, which is perfect. Now when we torqued these down, we went down to the factory spec with the ARP bolts, their spec of 90 foot-pounds. Did that in 3 increments of 30, 60, 90, all in the sequence that the manual provides. So, our bearings are perfect for our crank being turned 10 thousandths, which is perfect. So, next thing we're going to do, we'll get our crank in, we'll lube up these bearings this time. Another note, when you do the plastic gauge, use no lube whatsoever. That'll affect the measurement of this little guy. You don't want to do that. So, we'll put our main bearings, main girdle back on with lube, and then we'll go ahead and put our pistons and rods on and plastic gauge our rods. Okay guys, we've got the crank in, and we've got our main studs torqued down on the girdle there and also on the sides here and here. Everything looks good. Crank spins nice and easy. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our pistons. Before we do that, I have my pistons lined up here. I've cleaned most of the carbon off the top. These used to be carboned up pretty bad. What we're going to do now is clean these up really good, especially in these bearing surfaces, so there's absolutely nothing in there. And also down in the bottoms of the pistons, you can kind of see some junk laying around in there. We want to get these just spotless as we got the crank and everything else before we assembled. So, I've got my new rings in there. Everything's ready to go. I just got to clean these up and then we'll start putting them in. So, here we go. Okay boys, we've got our pistons cleaned up, especially in here. Down in the bottoms around the rings, the pin there, and also we've got our rod caps cleaned up. Next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to turn in our bearings, turn them into their respective spots here and on these. Get those all in, and we're going to turn around and we're going to put them in the block here. When I pull my pistons out, I mark them. Or in the pistons like this case, they're actually numbered. don't know if you can see that right here. Each one of these pistons and a cap has their number. So like you'll see this rod cap is 0064. That piston's 0064. So I keep track of what hole those pistons come out of. So those pistons will go back into the same hole that they were pulled out of. Some people swear you have to do it that way. Other people think it's a load of crap. I personally do it. That's up for you to decide. I don't think it makes a bit of difference, but for peace of mind, I do it. So we've got everything cleaned up, so we're going to get our bearings in, turn this block around, and we'll put our pistons in. Okay guys, back with the pistons. We've got our bearings installed and our rods and our rod caps. What we're doing now is we're going back and just checking another clean, making sure these pistons are spotless. So after we get that done, we need to identify the top of the piston. In my case, it's pretty easy. The way you read it. So that needs to be orientated towards the front of the engine. And with that, that's how you clock your piston rings. Now how I clock my piston rings is with my oil expander. I have that towards the back. The two oil rings that go with that expander, I have one towards the top and one towards the bottom here. Then with my two main rings, I have one up top here and one pointing at the top here. There's going to be 1,000 different ways people are going to argue how to do that. That's my way. If you don't like it, you can research your own way. If there's a better way, let me know. I'm free to advice. So, get all that set up. Then what I do here is I soak it in my little blend of oils to get the piston lubed up, make sure the rings got good oil in them. I'm bringing them over. Going to put just a little bit of lube in these cylinders, and each cylinder that I do, I'll make sure that that part of the crank is at bottom dead center. Now when I slip this piston in, I want to be damn sure I don't scratch the walls of this cylinder or mar up my crank. So we're going to use this handy little tool here to compress our piston rings and slip them in. So here we go. Okay, here we go guys. Got all the internals put in. Moving on to our front oil pump here. Alright, so with all these holes, be sure to squirt some brake clean in them. Excuse me. Get them cleaned out. I mean, clean, blow them out the air compressor. Make sure there's any kind of trouble going on right on the front of this crank. This is where your seal is going to set. You want nothing on there. Nice and clean. So, we'll prep that. Come over to our actual oil pump here. And of course, in your new gasket kit, there's going to be a new seal. So pop this seal out. Works pretty slick if you just wedge a screwdriver like this. Wedge on this here. This is up higher, so you get a good wedge on it. Get under it, pop it up and out. Then, obviously on the back of this, get it all cleaned up so it's perfectly clean gasket surface to mate up to the block there. Then on our main seal, we're going to do the same thing. Pop this one out, clean everything up. I mean, get this shit sparking, guys. This is very important. Tip with this seal and also the front main. Here's the new one. And with all seals, they're going to have that little spring in there. And that little son of a bitch likes to pop off on you. So, I pack this full of Vaseline right in there. So if it does kind of bounce or something, it won't pop that spring off. And trust me, guys, that sucks when that happens, because you can't see it. And you'll get this whole car put together, start it, everything's running, everything's great, fine and dandy, and all of a sudden you'll have a leak out of your rear main seal, and it's depressing as all hell. Trust me, it happened to me the first time I did one of these cars. So, very, very careful here. And make sure you get your seals down all the way, nice and flush. You don't want them in crooked. Take every possible step to get this right. And some people might argue me with the Vaseline thing. You know, whatever works for you. The Vaseline isn't going to hurt anything in that engine. So that's my opinion. That's the way I do it. If you don't like it, do it your way. So anyhow, we're going to get all this cleaned up. Seals put in. Holes cleaned out. Oil pump on. Then we'll have to get both the rear main in. And then we can slap our oil pan on. And we'll have the bottom half of the engine all sealed up. And that'll be a good thing. So here's our actual oil pump seal too. Gasket, excuse me. So, let's get to work, fellas. Okay guys, as you can see, we got our rear main put in. Put a little bit of oil around the lip, and just in a few spots I put a little bit of the Vaseline in there. You'll be able to see it just to hold that spring. So we've got the front one done as well. So now we're just going to install these on the back of this one, right in here. You're just going to use a little bit of sealant. There's no gasket for it. You'll seal this off here and really focus right on these here edges, because that's where it meets the block, and this is where your oil pan's going to sit. So this is where the oil would most likely find its way out, right here. So get a little sealant on that all the way around. Again, focus right in there. So we'll get this stuck on. We'll get our front one, and then we will be putting our oil pan on. So, here we go, guys. Another reminder, get all your holes clean, block too, just like on the front one that I showed you. Do the same on the rear, and yeah, here we go. Okay guys, you got the front oil pump on, and with it of course the front main seal. Just have these bolts in there hand tight, as there's these other bolt holes. They're all going to be holding it on, but there's other stuff that needs to be put on there, so I'm not torquing any of this yet. Same with this. This I can torque, I just haven't yet. So that's just sitting on there with the gasket hanging out. Coming around the back, I have the rear main seal in there and with a case. I used some gasket Permatex maker, so I just have those bolts hand tight in there just to squeeze out just a pinch of gasket. I gotta let it set for an hour, and then I'll torque those down so that'll be nice and sealed up. Something to show you what I was talking about on this rear main. Right, let's see, right there. So I really wanted the sealant focus because that's where it can creep out. It's tougher for it to creep up and out the top, so that's a popular spot. So anytime you run into something like this, definitely a little extra sealant there isn't going to hurt a thing. I'm going to do the same on my front here where it mates up to the block. I'll be sure to put a little extra sealant in here. And the whole oil pan will be held on, with just, not held on, but sealed with sealant, and that's how they came from the factory, and that works for me, especially because the gasket kit doesn't have a oil pan gasket. So we are going to let that set for a bit, torque it, and if we look right over here, 8 foot-pounds is what we're going to be torquing it to. So these books are so handy. Everything's in these. Like here, shows you to use the sealant. This is what they recommend. Which, anything Mopar, I mean, come on. Of course it's great. And then, yeah. So, we're going to do that. And once we get all that taken care of, we'll be putting the oil pan on. Okay guys, we've got the front oil pump torqued down, sealant in there just right on the corners there. Nothing huge, just helping to prevent a leak is all we're doing there. So we're going to get ready to put the oil pan on. So what we're going to do there, all along these rails, we want to make sure they're nice and clean, no old gasket, anything hanging up. So get all these degreased, nice and clean, make sure all the holes are clean. Come over to the oil pan here. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to clean up. You can see where I powder coated this, how some of the powder coat got on the edges here. Take a little brush, get all this cleaned up, degreased. Then we'll be putting some more of this excellent stuff on the oil pan. You can see these grooves right there. So you're going to take that Permatex, you're going to go in those grooves like a 1/4 inch bead, and then when you get to bolt hole, you come around the outside, back into the groove, all the way around. Knock it in right there, come around into the groove, all the way around and leave no gaps. If you really want to, some people go on the inside. It doesn't hurt nothing. It'll just make a little more mess is all. So we're going to clean both these up, degrease, use some brake clean, get it all nice and clean. Then we'll use our Permatex to make our gasket. We'll set our oil pan on, finger tight all of our bolts here, and then let it set for about an hour, and then we'll come back and torque them back down. And in your book, here's the torque sequence, and we'll flip back a page. Oh, and here. This shows you how to do the gasket as well, right here. There's your groove, there's your bolt hole. So there's that. Torque, where are we at here? Okay, here's our oil pan. This is for the dual overhead cam. Make sure you're on this if you have the VR4. If you don't, make sure that says SOHC. So here we're looking at 5 foot-pounds on all the 12 oil pan bolts. So hand tighten, let it set for an hour, and then we'll come back and we will torque them down. So here we go. Alright guys, we got the oil pan on. Not torque down yet, but just giving you an example of how this gasket maker works. If you've never used it before, you always finger tighten them, like I've been saying. And you look for that little bit of gasket to push out. Kind of see it all the way around. So you get that little bit of gasket pushed out. As you can see, it's all the way around. You'll let it set for an hour like that, and then we'll come back and we'll actually torque these bolts. So an hour later, we'll be back. Okay guys, next step, we got the oil pan on there, torque down. Gonna put in our knock sensor bracket and the sensor. Notice here, like I painted this, but I've got this all cleaned off. You want the perfect surface where this little bracket is gonna mate up. So see here, I cleaned these up as well. So we're gonna stick that in there, torque it down. Again, torquing is very important. Don't skip it. Your book will have it in there. Just take a look right here. Oh, there's our bracket. The overhead cam. 21 foot-pounds. So we'll torque those at 21 foot-pounds. While we're at this, we might start putting these brackets back on the engine. We are going to be putting the water pump back on as well. So we'll get after this and move to the next step. Alrighty guys, we've got the water pump on there. We don't have those torqued down. Knock sensor on it, torqued down. And as always, that one is just a stubborn little bastard. I had to turn it just right with the wrench so I get the socket on. But we got it torqued. Other thing I did is I put the little gasket on my oil plug so I don't lose it. Funny thing. Somebody might find it funny. Look at the manual here. You know, I said make the surfaces nice and clean, but they want it in intimate contact with the cylinder block. So, get that sumbitch clean. Anyhow, we're going to move on probably some of these brackets here. Tomorrow night I'll probably be putting the cylinder heads on and starting to check some valve clearance. Thing to note when you're doing that, I kept my old head gaskets so I can torque down these old gaskets to check my valve clearances without ruining my new ones. If you're wondering what that's about, my neighbor has a Dodge Viper, hence this whole teardown pretty much. So yeah, gotta beat a Viper. Anyhow, we're gonna get back after it. Here we go. Alrighty guys, it's starting to look like an engine again. What I went ahead and did there was just cleaned up the block on top. Had a little paint drip right on top of the actual cylinder block. Got that cleaned off my old head gaskets, got those nice and clean. Unpacked my heads that were just redone. Just doing a mock setup here so we know everything's going to go right. Got everything set on, everything looks good, everything's going to fit together well. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to torque this water pump first of all, which, just for the information, right there's the water pump. It looks like we're going 17 foot-pounds on those bolts. So we'll be torquing that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the heads off, and then in the very front and rear cylinder of each bank here, we're going to take some of my fancy homemade Play-Doh. Cool stuff, huh? We're going to put a little on top of each piston on the front and back, both sides. Then we're going to put everything back together on here. Cams in, torque the heads, of course, timing belt, time the whole thing, and then we're going to take this motor and make one full revolution so that each piston is going to come up to top dead center and each valve is going to drop down to its lowest point. And what that's going to do is when that valve comes down, it's going to push onto this Play-Doh, pinch it, and then of course release, and then we'll remove all of our cams, the timing belt, the head. When it gets off, we'll be able to measure how far that valve actually pressed this Play-Doh. We'll use a set of calipers, we'll measure this, and that'll give us our valve clearance. There's probably 1,000 different ways to do this. This is just the way the old timer that taught me how to work on things showed me. So that's how I'm going to do it. Things to note, it's going to take a while, but it's well worth the time. Do everything right, get a good measurement, and then we can check to make sure we're within spec on our valve clearance. And a lot of people will say, well, you only have to do one cylinder. Well, that's true. You should only have to do one cylinder, but there have been blocks that have been decked crooked and heads decked crooked. So up here it might clear and be within valve tolerance. In the back it may not. So as long as we're doing it, we're just going to do everything. So torque the water pump, put all this shit back on, time it, turn it over once, take it all apart and measure the Play-Doh. Here we go. Okay guys, so we're moving on to putting in the new Brian Carauer cams that I got. I had all my stock cams in and agreed, but as I mentioned before, I decided to go a little further, so I ordered up the Brian Carauer cams, and so I'm coming back. Gonna find my true top dead center. I got my coat hanger bolted in here so I can mark onto my degree wheel. I made up a little unit there because adapters that come with these degree wheel kits don't work for us, so gotta kind of get creative. So I got mine made up. I'm gonna get my new belt slipped on there, my harmonic balancer, and also I'm gonna get a dial gauge right in here, and I'll show you how to find your true top dead center. So we're going to do that, and I'll walk you through that. It'll be pretty quick because you can get pretty in depth with that kind of stuff. Just for, I don't know, shortness of the video here, we'll try to make it brief, and if you have any questions, I'd be more willing to answer them for you. Just keep in mind there's 1,000 ways to do this, so everybody is going to have their opinion. Some people's opinion will say this is absolutely wrong, other people's opinion will say yes. So do your own research, decide for yourself what you want to do. This is only a guide to the way that I prefer to do it. So we'll get the dial indicator set up and degree wheel on, and we'll kind of do a crash course on finding true top dead center. And this is cylinder number 1. That'll be the one we're working with, and when you do check it, it needs to be on cylinder number 1. So we'll get this all set up and we'll be back. Okay guys, so we've got our degree Jesus, degree wheel mounted on here. I've got my dial indicator up on. Number 1 piston. Now you'll notice this bolt goes all the way through to the crank and is locked tight. This is my little jam nut for my degree wheel. So as you can see, this is just loose right now. This will spin wherever I want. It's just a coat hanger that I clipped to use for a marker. So what I'm going to do now is, as we look at this top piston here, notice I have my old used head gasket on here. You'll know why for later, so disregard that for now. But anyhow, you set this dial indicator up, you want it just as straight with the piston as you can. Like this way, you can see I'm a little off. You need to bring it over just a little bit to get a little straighter. It's pretty good there. And also from straight up and down, it's about right. So disregard any readings you see on it right now. We got everything set up. Nothing's going to interfere. It's my coat hanger. I don't want anything interfering with my wheel. I don't want anything interfering with my setup here. So what we're going to do is we're going to guess, and I already have done it, right about where top dead center for this piston would be. So I'm going to guess it's right here. So I'm going to go ahead and zero out my gauge. And I'm sorry if you guys can't see this. Okay, so there I'm zeroed out. So how you're going to find true top dead center is, I'm going to guess it, just for now. Somebody's coming into my house. Okay, sorry about the break, guys. Postman showed up. So I had to take a little break. But anyhow, back where we were. Got my degree wheel set up. I've got it locked down snug for now. If I really want, I can move it without turning the crank by just turning on it. But it's not going to move on its own, just randomly. So I got it tight enough so I can move it if I have to, but not too tight to where when I try to move it, I turn the crank to throw off my readings. So all this is doing is, and you can do this with the heads on as well if you have an extension or a piston stop. Piston stops are, well, they're probably easier to use than this, but this is what I have, so that's what I'm using. So I've found top dead center already. So all we're going to do is, right now you can see I'm 10 degrees for top dead center. And, well, let's see, I'm just a little past 10. And right now my marking is at 512. So when I take this around to this other 10, it should be right around that 512 area. Okay, and I'm at 512 right now, and I'm only at 9, so I'm about a degree off on my wheel here. So anyhow, you're going to double check this, triple check. So how we do this is, you can use any number on that dial indicator that you want. It can be zeros, it can be really anything. So how we do it, this is kind of hard showing you guys with one hand. So anyhow, I'm going to take this wheel around, take it all the way around. You always want to go in the same direction the engine's going to spin. Okay, and I don't want to come up and slap my dial indicator. So when I get close to it, I want to slow things down. Okay, so I'm touching, starting to read. I'm going to watch that piston where it gets up to where I think is just before top dead center. Well, it's right about in there. So it's 490. So on my degree wheel, I look. I'm going to mark where it's at. Oops, sorry. 490. We're at 10, 11, 12, 13 degrees. So I'm going to roll ahead. I'm going to come up past top dead center. You'll see it stop there. Now it's starting to count back down, so I want to get to 490 again. I'm going to slowly coming in. Get closer. Okay, so there's 490 again. I'm going to mark on my degree wheel that spot. So right there. So now between them two marks, we'll add that up. Let's see, 10, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 25 degrees between these two marks. So we're going to half that, and that's top dead center. So half of 25 would be 12.5. So there's 1, 2, 10.5. Once I do my math here, so we'll divide that, and that's where we will make our new top dead center. So that's where we will adjust our wheel to. So let's mark it here. I'm gonna set down and mark this, and we'll be back. Okay, so I've got it marked. As we said, we had 25 degrees between. Half of 25 is 12.5. So as we count over, we go 12.5 over, which would be right there. So now, what we do is, sorry, this is really hard to do with one hand, holding the effing iPad too. So, I'm going to come around and put the degree wheel on that mark, which is right there. So we're about a half a degree from being perfect. So now what we do, we take our degree wheel, we just grab onto it. Remember, we have just enough so we can move it. We're going to rotate that degree wheel and really watch. We're at 535. We don't want to move that crank. So I'm going to have to set this down and move that half degree. Okay, so now we are on 0. And also 535 still there. So we have now found true top dead center. So we can take our marks off the degree wheel, or we can leave them on. It really doesn't matter. Now just keep in mind, if you happen to be throwing your head on, you hit this wire, or you bump anything in here, start over. This makes a world of difference. And double check, triple check this top dead center. Once I'm done videotaping here, I will probably check it 3 more times just to be sure. And we'll lock everything down snug, and we'll start moving into the heads. Okay, now that we have true top dead center found, I've double checked, triple checked. It is perfect. So, we're not touching that. We're moving our heads. So you can see I have these stock cams in there. Like I said initially, I was going to go with the stock cams, but I've since changed my mind. So we're going with the Brian Crowers. So now I need to take these stock cams out, wash these heads up really good, both sets. We're going to wash them up, clean them off the best we can, then we'll come back and put our solid lifters back in, put a preload of probably 5 thousandths on them, get our head studs in the block, snug down this both heads, put our timing belt on, and that is why I still have the stock head gaskets on there, or the old head gaskets, because we'll get the new cams in, studs in, and we'll start the degreeing process. When I do this, I'm actually put Play-Doh on this #1 cylinder to check my valve clearance after it's all said and done. So we'll get everything ready to go, put the heads on with the Play-Doh in the cylinder 1, degree our cams, turn the engine over a few times, pull this head off, measure the Play-Doh where the valve touched it to get our valve clearance. Everything should be fine. That's just a precaution. You don't have to do this, but I guess I just choose to. So we're going to do all that on time lapse. Also, I'll stop and I'll show you how to check your valve timings. Give you a quick cover of that, and after that it'll just all be time lapse. guys, we are cleaned up. All the grease and oil removed. Both sets of heads. We're going to get out the new cams right over there in that box. Put a little pre-assembly lube in. I will be, because this is my head towards the front, I'm going to be putting the solid lifters back in. Here and here. No other lifters or rocker arms put in. On the back as well, nothing in there. We're just going to do these two lifters, these two rockers, so we can adjust our cam gears to degree in our cams. So when we first set up, only this head here, which will be on the left side, so you're facing block, it's going to have rockers and the lifters in it. This one will just be blank. It'll have the cams in. We'll time them, but we're going to be degreeing off these two. And once we got these set, degreed, cam gears adjusted, we'll do the same to this side. The reason we don't put all the valve train assembly in there is just so it's easier to turn the engine over. It just makes it easier. So once we have that all timed, that's when we'll go back, put in all the rocker arms, all the lifters, the actual lifters, which are in this sack. So those are the 3rd gen lifters that we'll put in, so hopefully get rid of the little tick. But yeah, we're gonna put in our lifters and our rockers and these two, and our new cams in all 4. Get them slapped back onto the block and degree them. Okay guys, we've got our new cams set in. Just like I said, with this side we got our rockers in and our solid lifters. Those will be adjusted. This side, just the cams. No valve train hardware. No lifters, no rockers, I mean. So what we're going to do now is, okay, so this, with cams, this is going to be the peak of your lobe. Bottom side's kind of the, well, there's a term for it, but it's escaping my mind right now. So anyhow, we're going to have it on the flat spot of this cam where there's no lift, it's just straight where it should ride. We're going to adjust this solid lifter to where there's 5/1000ths of pressure down. Okay, we're going to do that for both sides. This is another thing that's going to vary between person to person, but this is the way I do it, so that's how I'm going to do it. So anyhow, I'll get my dial indicator set up, everything adjusted on here, and I'll come back and show you how I adjust for that 5/1000ths of preload. That's what that's accounting for, is pretty much the slack and bearings, where the rocker meets the valve, just taking all the slack out of the system. So when we go to degree these cams, we are on the money. So I'll get my dial indicator set up and we'll get ready to put that 5/1000ths preload onto the rocker. Okay, here we are. We've got our dial indicator set up. Same as with the piston. We want to shoot down onto that valve just as straight as we can get it, which you can't really see. But anyhow, you'll come down in the retainer. You want to be on a flat spot of the retainer. Make sure you're not touching the cam or anything. It's got a straight, clean shot. So now, right now, we're reading all zeros. What we're going to do is we're going to adjust the solid lifter until we have 0.005. Once we have that, we have our preload set. So we're going to do that for both sides, and then we'll have our 5/1000ths preload set on both sides. This head will be ready to go onto the block and ready to degree. So here we go. it is, 5 thousandths of preload. We will do the same for the other side, and we're ready to roll. Okay, so we now have our timing belts on and our heads, well, obviously our heads on. Got everything timed. I'm at top dead center there. So you can see, I don't know if you can see in the video, that cog is lined up down in that area, right on the money. As you can see on my valve covers, you'll see the pointer here, lined up with the mark there. See the square on this one, in between the two white lines there. Same on the other side. Went ahead and rotated this a couple times just to make sure all the slack was out of the belt. Rechecked my tension. Everything looks good, so now we're gonna pull this valve cover off, set up the dial indicator onto the intake valve. I'll start on that one. Then we will check the specs of the valve to make sure Brian Crowder actually produces the cam that he said that he produced. I'm sure he does, it's just something to check. So anyhow, we'll go through, we'll check all that, we'll degree it, we'll make sure everything's centered up. And again, be very mindful of this little wire. This controls everything. Even if I would leave this garage and come back tomorrow, I'd recheck top dead center. Because if somebody really wanted to screw with you, they could move that wire and it would ruin your day. So anyhow, we'll be back next time checking the, well, actually degreeing these cams. So, alright, here we go. Okay, so we have our dial indicator set up, degree wheel. We have the dial indicator going straight down onto the valve retainer at the same angle as the valve. Make sure it's not hitting anything on the cam or anything at all. So the cam card shows a valve lift on the intake of 401 thousandths. So we're going to check that. Get there. Okay, so our cam is right towards the cam card. So it shows at 7 degrees after top dead center. At, you can see it, timing events are correct at 50 thousandths lift. So 7 degrees after top dead center, we should be at 50 thousandths lift. Now I've already done this. So I've already got it set. So as we come around, bottom dead center. Okay, we're coming around. Starting to get lift. So at 50, we should be at 7, and right now we are at about 5. So we're 2 degrees off. The reason that is after talking to Brian Crowder about these cams, the downside when it's closing, I was actually a couple degrees off, so they recommend just splitting the difference. So that's what we did. So we were 2 degrees off there, so we'll come to 50 on the downhill side. It's supposed to be 31, so there we are, 2 degrees off. So our intake cam is set. Okay, so now we're on the exhaust cam. Same setup with our dial indicator. We can go around and check the peak lift of the exhaust cam. Should be 381. And our timing events at 50, as you see over there, should be 33 degrees before bottom dead center. It should open.
1 degree before top dead setter it should close.
I've already set it, so it's just going to be a brief walkthrough. Now on this one, our intake, I could get the exact lift. On this exhaust, I'm close, but I don't have the exact lift. And that's probably due to error in the way I have it set up. It's not perfect. It's close we can get it with the tools that we have. So anyhow, we're coming around, see what our peak lift we can get here is. It's going to be 380. So we're 1 degree off. It's not bad. Now we'll come around. We're going to check our timing events. Like I said, I've already got these adjusted. So we're going to come around to where we get the 50 thousandths lift. See where we're at. Okay. Thousandths. We are at 31, 32. We're a degree off from our 33 on the opening. So we'll check the close. So we'll come up past peak lift and back down to 50. Here's our peak lift at 380. Down to our, oh shit, I passed it. I'm going to reverse it. This is a no-no. But for the video we're going to do it, because I already have it set. Okay, so... $49, pretty close. We are 1 degree, about 1 1/4 past the 1 degree before top dead center. So if I would have stopped on actual 50, it would have been a degree off. So our exhaust cam is good now. So we'll lock those down and do the reverse for this side. And that is what it's all about, the green cams. Times, take your head back off, and measure thickness of the Play-Doh. So, there we go. Here's our Play-Doh. Put the head back on. Okay, so after we pulled our head off, you can see where the valves touch the Play-Doh. Just barely. How you measure it is, we have plenty of room, but if you were to measure this, you would cut it like this. and you would measure that distance, and that would be your valve clearance. But we've got plenty, so we're good. Okay, so we are set up on the other side. We've got our rockers in there on cylinder 4. I believe it'd be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. Cylinder 4, that's the twin to cylinder 1. So we got our 5 thousandths preload on our valves. So we're going to do the same exact thing that we did on the front end of the motor. Now we're just going to set up on these valves back here. As you can see right here and there. So we'll go through our cam card, we'll check all that, and we'll do just like we did. Split the difference if there's any variance, and we'll check with Play-Doh again for valve clearance. And after that, we'll put on the actual head gaskets, put in the head studs, get everything torqued down, and then time it for the final time. And we can get this engine sealed up. So, here we go, time lapse. Alrighty guys, we've got the cams degreed in. Next step is pulling our heads off. Moving over here, we're going to put all the hardware back in the heads, the new lifters, and put the head studs on, torque them down to the block, the new head gaskets. There's really not much more to show here, so everything will be in time lapse. Pretty straightforward, get everything in, lifters, rockers, torque them down, and then it's probably on to intake and shit like that. But it's jam night, so we gotta do this quick so we can get this shit going. Here we go. Alright, so we got our heads on, our air piece studs. We're just going to come back and torque the heads down to 105 pounds, and we're going to do it in 3 steps. So we'll probably just do 35 pounds first time, 35, then make up the difference on the last go. So we'll go with this pattern as long as it correlates to the service manual, and we'll torque these heads down, and they are good to go. Alright guys, so I obviously have the heads torqued on, bolted down. All we've done here is pretty much put valve covers on, the lower plenum, intake, fuel rails, torqued all that stuff down. This is all the basic stuff. We're just doing the reverse of how you broke down the motor. And be sure to torque everything properly and double check the torque just to make sure. I actually had on one of my cam caps, one of the bolts actually twisted off because somewhere down the line either it was over torqued or it was just a bad bolt. So check that. It wasn't a huge deal. I just went to different bolts for all of them, solved that problem. Added in a fuel rail crossover that was larger than the stock one. It has the same inside diameter as this on these, so you can get bigger fuel rails. I know they sell them, but probably not worth it. Went with the RC Engineering fuel injectors. They're a 750cc. That's kind of where I'm hoping. I figured out that I will need for fuel requirements. All my other parts I went through Ninja Performance. Takes a little time to get them, but pricing's good. Free shipping. 3SX pricing kind of sucks. Well, it really sucks. And they just got rid of their free shipping, so that really sucks too. But they're quick. So take what you want there. Next things we're going to be doing is I actually have the transmission at a machine shop getting the internal bell housing brace welded in. Once that's done, we'll get our turbos and exhaust mounted up, and I believe I'm going to actually be using just some like exhaust wrap around the manifolds. Try to hold a little extra heat in there so we get as much as we can to them turbos instead of the stock little tin shields. What else? Went with the copper plugs. They're cheaper than the iridiums because I'm sure during this tuning process I'm going to have some fouled out plugs, and these are the plugs I went with. Might not be the perfect ones, but they're going to do for the tuning. I'm also going to go with an AEM tuner, the standalone. So if anybody has any real know-how, and I mean like seriously knows how to run them, give me a shout, because it's going to be a first time for me, and I guess I'm in the middle of South Dakota, so there's not a whole lot of people that mess with them around here that I know of. Hell, most people don't even know what this car is, so whatever. But yeah, once the tranny's back and we get the turbos mounted up, we're going to try dropping this assembly in together. I've been told it can be done, but I've never seen it or had anybody prove it to me. So we're going to give it a shot. I do know I'm going to pull off my harmonic balancer there, give me a little more room, and I'll do a video on it, the install back into the bay, and hopefully it works. That would simplify well, the time to get this motor out. But if anybody has any questions, really anything, or any pointers for me, please leave it in the comments, and thanks everybody for watching. It's kind of cool that there's still a lot of people interested in these cars, even though they're crazy expensive to do this. Should have picked something else, but that is a sexy car, even though it's dusty. So yeah, powder coat turned out great, I think. Other notes are I did update the fuel pump and the wiring, which will be in the next video.